Good evening and welcome to the Laugh at Monkey Music Show. Today we've on Ted Leonard. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing good. So as we were saying earlier before breaking the fourth wall, I've been digging your music for a while, and I think it's very some it's a pattern of a lot of prog style music. Is you, everyone's in a lot of bands. Like I like one person, and also like I realized that you're in that other band I like, and then so is
Uh,
in like a bunch of other people. You know, it's definitely a
there's
rabbit hole.
absolutely. I've been well, apart from the ones you already mentioned, Spocks, Enchant, and Pattern Seeking Animals, which is the probably the it's the one that I'm recording parts for right now. Recording guitar parts for our fourth album. And But yeah, I mean, apart from those, I've been in a band called Thought Chamber, which was almost on the metal side of proggy, and as well as this band called Effector, which was just one album, and um, and they're thinking about doing another one. So yeah, I always joke that, like, I sing for Spocks, and Enchant and any other band that has $5 and needs a singer.
It's kind
Uh,
of cool though because it feels like it's like a very much like a working musician thing. Like a lot of bands do a lot of work with a lot of the artists. It's very open. It feels like it's a very good community where it's not like one band, that's it. I mean,
yeah,
it's
well, I
healthy.
mean, in this genre of music, I mean, you hear this band and you hear some amazing guitar player, and you're like, man, I want to work with that guy. I think in other bands that or in other genres where bands just kind of keep to themselves, it's because the genre itself doesn't really produce the type of musicians that that you want to like. I would, I mean, look, Transatlantic's a great example, obviously, but Pattern Seeking Animals, people kind of refer to as an offshoot of Spocks because there's three members from
Right.
Spock and the core writer. And I guess you could think of it that way. We don't like to, but it's kind of unavoidable that people would make that comparison.
What would you make the difference as to a uninformed person saying, all right, we already have Spock's beard. Three guys from the band are doing something different. Like, how would you say this is different because
I would say it's different because the song structure is a little bit more immediate to whereas Spock's is a little more quirky.
Mhm.
So like Pattern Seeking Animals is, I say immediate because you can pretty much latch onto it pretty quickly. It's not doesn't it's proggy, but it's not as proggy, I guess I would
Right.
say. um, so it has somewhat of a pop element. It also has a lot of kind of world instruments and really cool like acoustic things going on, and even dabbles into like spaghetti western kind of vibes occasionally. And it's just there's no rules. That's the great thing about prog. But um, I think the the bummer is that like any genre, people start to kind of gravitate towards a certain sound. It's
Mhm.
got to have mellotron, it's got to have a B3. It's um, and that's great. I love those sounds, but PSA is a little bit more unworried about fitting into those kind of pigeonholes. And so yeah, I think it's a little bit more adventurous in that regard. It's more proggy, but yeah. So it's the thing that's most active right now. We've put out 3 albums in 3 years and intend to put the fourth one out in the fourth year, and it's exciting because I get to play guitar in that band, which in the other bands I always play guitar live,
Right.
and occasionally we'll record a few parts, but by and large, the guitar was taken care of by someone else, and you know, rightfully so. I mean, they both those guitarists in Enchant and Fox Spirit are amazing players that I would, I. So most of the time when we're playing live, I'm just playing parts that they recorded. Whereas Pattern Seeking Animals, I get to record my parts, kind of choose my sounds, kind of create my
Right.
tonal palette. So it's a lot of fun for me. Um, getting to wear that hat as well, and not just being the dumb singer.
Well, I hear a difference in all these projects you're in, but I wouldn't even want to gather to try to put it out there to compare it for people because obviously I'm trying to introduce people to you and a lot of your music. Um, Enchant was probably your first bigger band, right? Your big
Enchant
band.
was the first. Yeah, Enchant was the first band that I was in that got signed. And so yeah, that was how it started. As a matter of fact, and in Enchant, as far as for people who don't know, was we kind of fell into the neo prog um, kind of bucket, which is how some people would describe like Rush. So it
I
was
can hear that. I can hear that little kind of that feel.
yeah, the keyboard sounds were not necessarily old sounds. They were kind of, newer synthy sounds, kind of like
Mhm.
Rush. And so we were kind of in the Rush saga, kind of in that, realm. And we ended up being on the same label as Spocks Beard and ended up touring with them twice. And once with Neil as the lead singer and once with Nick as the lead singer. So we've known those guys forever. And then when I moved to Northern California, I lived very close to the bass player from Spocks. He ended up joining my cover band, which is Rolling Heads, and
Because you're not in enough bands already.
yeah, well, it was just it's a money making thing, and it was fun. And actually I liked it because I got to play guitar. I was the only guitarist, so it was fun for me to kind of rock out,
Yeah.
because in these bands I don't really get to do that, and I obsess on guitar. I probably play more guitar than I sing, for sure. And but anyway, so that he just when the time came for them where they needed a singer, he and I had already been working together for a few years, so it was kind of a natural transition to fill that hole in Spock's beard. And Spock's beard is, for those who don't know, is what I would call more retro proggy, which is sounds like a oxymoron, but retro prog. But yeah, I mean, they kind of harken back to early, yes, Genesis, Gentle Giant,
Yeah, I
especially.
was gonna say yeah, old Genesis feel.
Yeah, so which is totally cool. It's totally
I don't think
different
you
from.
sound like it, but it's a feeling. I guess I would say if you like old Genesis and old Yes, you'll like Spock's beard. It's that feeling. It's what I would probably say. You know.
Right. Yeah, and it's in some ways though, I think Spock's was kind of more on the melodic side of that genre, for that matter.
Mhm.
It was not. It was quirky, but it was singable. Like I would say that there was definitely moments with Genesis, of course, that were very memorable and obviously, um, but Spock's is a little more melodic. I'd say
Right.
sing song can latch on to the melodies a little more quickly,
Hmm.
especially the first six albums with Neil at the helm. You know, so and
Has it
yeah.
changed a lot? Well, so like with you singing now, you singing the sing song, has it changed a lot now with you being the singer now? I mean, what's the dynamic now of the songs?
Well, there's some continuity there for sure. That's after I took over, there's certainly the keyboard sounds and the guitar sounds, and we still when we write, we try to write things that are approachable. So I come from a little bit more of a rock edge vocally, I
Mhm.
guess. So the vibe changed a little bit when I joined in that regard. And the songs that I've contributed were probably not, they were less like Neil's writing probably than anybody else in the band. So you could kind of hear when it was a song I contributed where it was definitely a deviation from the normal Spock's type of sound, which was cool. I mean, it was like you don't want, I don't know. I mean, I want the band to change, and when I think about the various um, versions of Kansas that the iterations that have happened over the years with Kerry Livgren dropping out. Well, actually, first Steve Walsh dropping out and having a different lead singer come in, and then Kerry Livgren left and Steve Morse came in, and I love every iteration of Kansas right up until the modern day with Ronnie on vocals, and
Yeah.
I love the fact that in some ways they're the same, but in some ways they've sounded very different. Those songs, those albums that were put out in the late '80s when Steve Walsh came back and Steve Morse was playing guitar, didn't sound like '70s Kansas at all, and some people just hated it, and I loved it. I just because I was they could have put out a blank CD and I would have well, I would have loved it. I'm sure I would have been like, oh my gosh, that's so innovative, you
You
know.
ever you would have copied some songs onto it from other Kansas albums.
What's that?
I think you would have copied other Kansas songs onto it from other albums. That's all.
Right. Yeah, right. My best of. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I love that growth and change. And some people don't, which I understand. You think of Spocks Beard. Some people think of Spocks Beard, they think of the first 5 albums or 6. And they really, that's, they had a hard time when Neil left. And I totally get that because I'm a huge Neil Morse fan.
right.
The reason why I was so excited to get the gig is because I was already such a big fan. So it's tough because like I when you think about being a replacement singer, and I've been that on a number of occasions, it's you don't want to be, let's see, you don't want to be the Gary Sharon of the Van Halen.
Yeah.
um, you don't want to be you don't want to make one album and then the band goes, okay, that's it, we're done, we're done. That's kind of what happened with Van Halen. um, you know so I was really worried about that when we started, and the hate that poor guy got. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
it just I was really worried about that. But the first album came out of the gates and really struck a positive tone with a lot of people, and so we didn't really get that negative lashback, or if we did, they were kind enough to mutter it under their breath.
So while we're talking about that band, what's the next deal with you guys for another album? Or since you're balancing so many bands now, how does that go?
Well, it was kind of on kind of a hiatus of sorts, and but oddly enough, I just got a text from Al about an hour ago saying, "Hey, have you checked out those stems I sent you?" And so he sent me some songs that he's been working on. Al's the guitar player for Spocks Beard, by the way. Al Morse, Neil Morse's brother, and so we're thinking about doing another one. Um,
Awesome.
so I'm going to throw down some vocals over what he recorded and see how it feels, and see if we need to change keys or see if it's worth pursuing. In the meantime, I'm really busy with pattern seeking animals, and of course I have a job. So
On top of everything else.
yeah, I mean yeah. So and my job's gotten more and more demanding over the course. It's almost like where the gap in my musical life created by COVID was like instantly filled by just more work.
Oh,
And so it's been lucrative, but I'm happy to be doing music again. We were recording the whole time, basically. Pattern Sick Animals just kind of used that gap to pump out another album or two. And so I've been busy in that regard, but playing in front of people is where it's at. And it's
is it
why
it's
we.
hard like to balance it? Like because like some people have jobs that are like in the music business or other jobs where they can kind of take breaks. Like how's it for you to balance the work load thing?
It used to be fairly easy. Back in 2014, which was the last big tour. In 2019, we did a shorter one. It was pretty easy to take my work with me on the road because I work from home anyway. And I could get most of what I needed to get done from the road. And I just found on this last tour with Transatlantic anyway, that the way the schedule was, and probably because I play keyboards in that band and my computer is what houses all the keyboard sounds. So my computer was up on stage by like 2 p.m. It was impossible to do any work. I basically roll out of bed at 11:30, eat something, and then my computer would be all hooked up and on stage already. And so it was like it was really hard to keep up with work this recent tour. So if I'm not playing keyboards, it's not too hard. I can definitely just sit backstage and get done what I need to get done. But
Might need to get a work computer is what you might need to do. It's, being an IT guy, that makes me anxious just thinking about you having everything on one computer.
I know.
Can
Believe
you
me,
imagine that just thinking about it? Oh.
I know. What I used to travel with too. I used to have a PC for work and my Mac for the keyboards, and I used to do that. And I probably, if I know about a tour far enough out, I will probably get another Mac, and this one will be relegated to the task of just providing the keyboard sounds. And actually, I don't even know if that's a good idea. That thing kept freezing on me during that tour.
So
Only when we got one of the keyboards was just not playing well with it, and so I'd hit a chord and it would just, I'd walk away and the chord would just be ringing, And if you're a keyboardist that uses main stage, you have to go Control P or something like that to just stop it, and then you have to reboot it, and so you're gone for 30 seconds at least. So yeah, this thing was giving me problems. So I may actually,
make that one your work one.
I need 2 new Macs. That's what I need.
There you
That's
go.
right, honey.
Go on, get them. I just got one. They're great. Got Mac Pro. They're awesome. Well, so you're doing with this thing. It's transatlantic. So what happens? That at a short period, 2019, and then that's on a break, or is that what's the deal with that one now?
Transatlantic is a band that really only assembles and puts things out when they have time. So I'm not in the band. For anybody who doesn't know, they're a 4-person band that's kind of like a super group made up of members from various bands, including Mike Portnoy, and well, I just might as well name them all, but members of Marillion, Flower Kings, Neil Morse, Spocks Beard, and Dream Theater, and the 50 other bands that Mike Portnoy's in. And I'm the 5th guy. So I'm the utility guy that plays all the parts that their 8 hands can't cover, because, invariably when you record albums these days, you layer parts. And so I go in and try to
fill all the holes.
Yeah, fill the holes, make it as true to the album as possible, given my poor keyboard skills. But
all those awesome people, you're like, I'm a poor keyboard player. That's a bad sell.
Well, I'm not. It's never been. I told Neil when he approached me in 2014. I'm like, I'm not really a keyboardist. I can play parts. I know chordal theory, and I usually the parts I'm playing are pads or single note, type of things, and I'm not having to, play. As soon as you get my left, forget it, So, but it was a total trial by fire, and that it actually advanced me on the instrument quite a bit, just doing that first 6-week tour with them back in 2014. So this time around was a little easier, although the parts were on the new album some of them were just nutty. It wasn't so much like shred parts, but just these weird lines that would change key every bar, and then come down in major, go up in minor, and just constantly changing keys. So it's like, unless you've been running your scales every day for the last 4 years, it was hard to commit to memory. It was actually more remembering which interval comes next, whether it's a whole step or a half step. That was the only way I could really do it, is like ho ho half, ho ho half, just like, and because there was no way to keep track of which key I was in for the next bar. It was just a nightmare. It was this one particular theme that happens throughout the new album that even Neil, and Pete wrote it. He's the bass player, and every night he's like, "I'm so sorry I wrote that."
Yeah, it's pretty complex. It's a great album, but I'm like, you gotta be pretty good, to be playing that. You gotta give us a little more credit. I think you're got a lot more going on.
I got it, I got it together, but yeah, it was a challenge for sure. Guitar is my main instrument, and it comes way more naturally and way more easily to replicate some of these guitar parts than it does, Neil's keyboard parts.
It's pretty funny. So you're in a lot of your bands, you're either singer and then keyboard. Not as much guitar as you would think being your main instrument.
Well, in Spocks, yeah, I had to start covering keyboard parts almost immediately. As soon as I joined Spocks, I've always been a 2 keyboardist band. And even when Nick was lead singing, he was playing a lot of keyboard parts. He's a multi-instrumentalist too. Not a bad drummer, by the way. Hands down, favorite drummer on the planet, I think. So hopefully Jimmy doesn't see this. But yeah, so there's always been those little parts. But again, they were like pads and single notes, In Enchant, I've always just played guitar. I've never had to really cover any keyboard parts.
Now,
So
Enchant hasn't done anything in a while, like released anything since like 2014, right?
that's correct.
Enchant's still
That's
together though, right? Is it just
it's not, yeah, when nobody's called Time of Death. Um,
yeah,
so
because I wasn't
yeah,
sure. I was like, oh, it feels like they didn't. I don't remember hearing anything about it, and I couldn't find anything on it. And I was like, it's been been a hot minute since you guys have done anything, but you have a lot of projects. So
yeah, and the idea was a few years ago to put something together, and they had like I think 7 songs already demoed and ready to go, and then crickets. So I haven't really heard. I need to reach out to those guys,
and do
but I
those guys
never
have a
really
lot of side projects also?
not these well cover band stuff really. Just not nothing.
Like you?
I take that back. I take that back. Bill, the keyboardist, has been involved and I think he's doing the next Thought Chamber album. He was on the second one, and they're moving forward without me. And that was a conscious decision a few years ago because I had like 4 bands putting an album out in the same year, and they were wanting to, they were wanting to do another one. I'm like, I've got to cut something, and I'm going to go crazy here. Oddly enough, now I probably would have the time to do it again, but stylistically, it's just not my jam. I love what we did, but it's it's kind of got that metal edge. And I'm not a metal singer.
I'll have to go back and listen to. That's one of the pieces that you were and I was not familiar with, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I mean it's great stuff. I it was really cool. The first album, both albums are great, but there's it's got kind of like a sci-fi edge to the lyrics and stuff. It was definitely the guitarist Michael Harris's baby, and so he kind of wrote everything. I just came in and embellished on vocal parts. Basically, that was my contribution. So,
What
but
about
yeah,
solo stuff? Like and all this. I mean, since you play everything, you can do everything. Do you have any stuff you work on just yourself that you're gonna? You know what I mean?
yeah, I had a solo album out in
That's a while ago,
2007.
right? Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, and it was yeah, and I was getting ready to do another one in 2010 or 11 when Spocks called. And so a lot of those songs that were going to be on the next solo album ended up being on Brief Nocturnes. Some of them, one of them was on the following album, Oblivion Particle, and still another was on the more recent one. And actually, 2 of the songs from that same era are on the
Wow.
last Animals album. Yeah, I wrote a bunch of songs. I was going through some heavy stuff personally, and just wrote just wrote a crap load of songs in the course of about a year, and and so some of those songs are still getting
Used.
used. Yeah,
It's
so
kind of crazy.
yeah, much ado. The 2 songs that I contributed for the last Pattern Seeking Animals album were both from that span of time.
What about you doing it your own, something new, fresh? Only because of COVID, is kind of times changed a little bit. Is that something in your future, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I write parts, and I haven't been. I don't know. I think just between work and life and everything, I haven't been that prolific. I think my problem is I always have to go through something terrible to really spew out a bunch of songs.
Ooh.
Something like traumatic. I feed off of trauma and I don't know why, but that's what. So, and I've just been too damn happy, I guess. I don't know. so
Well,
so I
that's
don't
fine too.
life, life is too good, and so it's like I don't know. I can't write that song. It's a happy day. I don't know. I got really whenever when I was on the Oblivion Particle, and even for the songs that I contributed on Noise for, which was the third Spocks album with me on it.
Yeah.
Those were written more recently, but even those albums were a few years ago at this point. And to write when I'm not coming from a place of kind of like catharsis,
Right.
uh, I really have to create a story in my head. And it's interesting because that's what John, the core writer of Pattern Seeking Animals, pretty much does. I mean, there's very little of his personal experience in his songs. It's always like a short story that he's concocted that he and then writes a story.
Feels like a lot of singers do that. They're either personal or their stories. There's no like mix up between the two. You're like, is that real? Is it not real? I don't usually see a lot of that with songwriters.
Yeah, and I think it would be obviously if you're not writing about personal things, then you have a lot more material to draw from.
I would think.
You only have one life, and it gets pretty old to talk about the same, terrible thing that happened to you. You start to stretch a little bit. You have to talk about the weird things, like peeing your pants in first grade.
Well, that could be an album too, right? I don't know. You might have to wordsmith that a little bit better, but it could be something. Actually, I don't. R. Kelly probably did something already with that. So, that hard rim shot. So actually, one thing that I could also talk about, and probably to the end of this, is your gear, your guitar. Like, what's your gear setup for like your guitar?
My newest addition is, I don't know if you've ever heard of Greg Koch. That's his name. That's what he calls himself. There's a lot of
I know.
Other people would pronounce it Koch. It's Koch. But anyway, that's how he pronounces it. And so he has a signature series Reverend guitar. It's very much a Telly. And nice. It sounds like a Telly. It plays like a Telly. And it's got this pickup system in it that's completely noise free. So one of the things that drew me to it. So I gravitate towards Tellys. I have this one, and the other ones are upstairs. But
that's all right. Okay.
But I've never owned. Oddly enough, I've never owned a Fender Telly. I have Fender Strats. So there's some other guitars. I have the blonde that's furthest from you is a Strat Deluxe. And then there's the jazz 5-string bass, and then there's a Tom Anderson. The blue one's a Tom Anderson.
What's the red one?
Huh?
What's that red one?
It's a 3/4.
Is it?
It's like I bought it for my daughter, but I gotta tell you,
I think you were talking about that in the video. I saw you talk about that in the video. Who makes it? What is it? A Squire?
Yeah, it's a Squire. It's like a little,
bullet. Is it a bullet or something?
It's like I haven't picked it up in forever, but it's a killer sounding.
Punchy.
The strings are hecka dead and stuff. But anyway, it's a killer sounding little Strat. But
that's pretty funny.
A couple times.
But anyway, it's similar to mine that I have. One of mine.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. If you look behind me, it's the red one behind me on the wall.
Oh yeah.
That's an Aria Pro 2 from
wow.
like 82.
I remember those.
It's like a Wildcat or something. I got for like $40 like on a Craigslist from somebody. Right. I guess I only got a deal on that.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then for at least for this band right now, I'm using a Helix. And preferably, I'd rather not, frankly, but have to cover a lot of tonal ground. And so it's just way too easy. I mean, I can either have a Randy McStein sized pedal board, or I saw you interviewed him, so
I did.
Which I just don't have. I don't at this point. I could probably afford it, but I would have to explain it, and that's the hard part.
You got 2 Macs you got to buy now first, anyhow.
I'd have to justify it. Yeah,
right.
I have when I'm doing real pedals, I have a twin reverb that I like, that I swap the speakers out for, and I have an Egnator amp, and but for this band, I record with the Helix, which is really convenient because it actually records. You can split the signal, you can choose your tone, and then you can also record the direct signal, so it can be reamped at whatever studio, so I can do that simultaneously, which has been really handy. So a lot of the tones on the album are like Rich's, our sound engineers old Marshall or old Box or
Okay.
something.
That makes
Um,
sense because that's what I'm like curious about because you have a lot of sounds and a lot of your stuff. I'm like, it's a lot going on there. Like, how do you kind of simplify it?
yeah, so all the crazy fuzzes and stuff, and then there's sitar, and there's, the sitar actually is from this guy, which has been my go-to guitar for Spocks and transatlantic because it's actually a line 6, so it's got all the digital voodoo. So like the 12 string sounds in there are actually quite good. But also you can get a sitar sound out of it. And then it also has the magnetic pickups that sound, very much like a Les Paul. So
Yeah.
that's a cool guitar. Uh, Tuning issues though, like every Les Paul style guitar. I hate it. It drives me nuts, especially when it's like a breakdown part and it's just like in Transatlantic on this last tour. You'd be breaking down to just this little arpeggiated 12 string part. This isn't a 12 string, but
Yeah.
it's like, and it's just naked. It's by itself and completely out of tune. Yeah. And then, and I don't have, I'm by myself at that moment. I can't just stop and go, hold on guys, let me get this back. So, when you see anybody who saw Transatlantic, that, they'd see me incessantly, tuning my guitar every opportunity I got because,
You timed to tune it between rebooting your Mac, right? Well, your Mac was rebooting. You could tune your guitar.
There was a nightmare. There were some nightmare gigs, just issues like that. But yeah, so that's basically my rig. I really want to build a proper analog rig for this band. It would just take some serious creativity, and I don't really like fuzz pedals. I have like 5 million overdrive pedals and some really cool stuff too, but I don't have like I have the original Chandler tube driver from
Oh
the
wow.
80s, like, and I have the newer version of that. I have all these love pedals and all these really cool pedals that I don't get to use in this band because I'm using the Helix. But I never bought a fuzz pedal that I liked. And the funny thing is, John, when he's writing, there's a fuzz sound in every song. And I texted him and I'm like, dude, can you lay off the fuzz? Because I just don't even like that sound. So I decided this album, anytime he does a fuzz, I'm just going to do a high gain, something that has a lot of sustain, but I'm just going to do high gain instead of fuzz, which is, essentially
Similar. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that fuzz has that like almost. I mean, some people love it, and sometimes I like it too. But it has that kind of lo-fi, that grittiness, depending on what fuzz you pick. And there's some really cool ones built in to the Helix.
There's a lot of sounds for fuzz. I mean, you really can't
Yeah, you can't narrow it down to one.
narrow down. Not nowadays.
Right. I have a couple that I kind of gravitate to. Let's pull it up here. I don't know how interested your listeners are for hearing different. All that. Yeah. It's like has that. It's just really kind of. There's that one. There's the pocket fuzz, which is.
I like that one.
But my favorite is this guy. How would you go? Yeah, just stick it on the neck and. I love that.
That's kind of the 70s. That's kind of a retro feel.
It's like that Octavia kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Very cool.
Toys. Awesome. Yeah, so if I get that's the other trouble about running completely analog is if you have a fuzz with that much gain on it, you're gonna just be feeding back, across the stage, especially single coils and stuff. So there is some merit to digital, I suppose, and they've come a long way. The Line 6 stuff has come a long way, and all the other brands that are more expensive have really come a long way. I just haven't made that leap yet.
Well, doing all the sounds you make, though, I mean, digital's got a little easier too, for everything you have going on. You couldn't possibly Having everything analog.
because the way that this is set up too, I can program everything in kind of scenes, and
Hmm.
so all the delays spill over into the next patch, which some of the more expensive digital stuff doesn't do. Um, and so yeah, there's that, and I can set up every song as a bank, and so it's just kind of it's so convenient. If I had to do that with an analog board, I would just have to have some sort of control system in front of it, and in addition to all the pedals, it's that system is also a pretty penny. So it just gets really pricey to try to replicate what I can do here. Although I'm sure it would sound a little bit better. It will sound a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's getting nowadays. Things are getting so good digital. It's hard to tell. You know,
I know. That's what I mean. It really is.
you get on the
There's
forums and people just argue about that stuff for days.
I know and for me, it's like it's a tool to get the job done.
Right.
If you're still going to sound like you,
I agree.
having that natural like tactile feeling of being on stage with a loud amp behind you. There's something about that I think may urge you towards a better performance, or at least a different, like more energetic performance. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? But I think there's something to that. And so, that a lot of times, even with this, I'll turn the speaker simulation off and throw it through the effects return of an amp, so I can have. So first of all, I'm using the power tubes, and this just acts as a preamp basically, so I can kind of have that best of both worlds type thing. But at least for the first shows we did with PSA, I just went direct. I really missed it. And our bass and Dave really missed it. He's our bass player. He's the only one who didn't have in ears on, and he's so the bass amp's like cranking on the stage, and nobody else is making any noise. And he said even like with his wedge dialed up, it still
Oh
just
wow.
felt empty and weird. So I think for the next when we do the prog stock, you have to see. Um, but I don't know if you can see both of them.
Okay.
Anyways, this little guy, he's the new one. Like a
He's,
puppet.
he's cute.
Okay. Hello, puppet. Um, yeah, this time for prog stock, I'm gonna at least bring a real amp and put this through it or try to assemble some sort of pedal board for it. But yeah,
Wow.
here.
You are a busy dude, man. You got a lot going on. You know,
Yeah, and then at work, the job is
I
nuts.
know, I know, and work. I mean, so I mean, I appreciate you taking time today to sit
Oh, my
down
pleasure.
and chat with me and introduce you to to the audience. I want people to check out all of your projects that you're in. And when your next release, I'll reach out to you if you want to come back on again. We can talk about break down some of your stuff. But just kind of get everybody's appetite and start listening to your other stuff first.
Shouldn't be long before PSA finishes this one, and then there's always a 6-month delay once you submit the masters these days because of good old
Yeah,
vinyl.
in the vinyl.
So,
All right,
but
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah, and where they can check you out? Facebook? You want to send people to Instagram? What do you want
I have a Ted Leonard fan page on Facebook, but Pattern Seeking Animals. It's pattern-seeking animals.
to?
Is a good place to go, and I believe on the Facebook page there's links to the actual website and that sort
Okay.
of.
Excuse me.
And of course, Spocks, Beard, and Enchant have pages, but
Yep.
they've been they've been collecting dust for the most part. Pattern Seeking Animals is active and putting stuff out, and so it's a good place to look. That's if I was starting with it's obviously the most recent albums that I've been involved in, and the very most recent um, is probably my favorite of the three. So that one it's the one with it's the one on right here,
Yeah,
right there. So
I'm familiar with it. Great artwork.
it's called Only Passing Through, and yeah, the artwork is really cool. Can't wait to put that on a shirt. But
Awesome, man.
so,
All right, man.
well, thank you so much, and
Thank you for
yeah,
being on the show. It's awesome.
yeah, I guess when the next album comes out, maybe we can get back on and talk a little bit more.